Hi, I'm Reysevan, and this is our podcast about The Outsiders. If you didn't know, The Outsiders takes place in Tulsa, Oklahoma, 1967. The book was written by Essie Hinton when she was 16, and the purpose was to portray her frustration with the social class divide and teenage challenges when she was in high school. The 1983 film was directed by Francis Ford Coppola, and with me I'm joined by my friends.
Peyton.
Hello, I'm Devin.
And we're going to talk about some questions. One of the first questions I had was about how does the separation of the Socias and the Greasers play a role in the main character's behaviors throughout the story? Peyton, what do you think about Ponyboy?
Oh, Ponyboy definitely thinks he's like different than everyone, and the thing is all of the kids he's hanging out with are older than him, and so he just kind of feels like an outsider. Not to make a pun or anything, but he feels like an outsider compared to the other kids. And because his older brothers, one didn't make it to college and one dropped out of high school early, he feels a lot of peer pressure from the two of them to finish school, even though he's going through like all of these rough times and stuff. And it really, even though it's not between the Socias and the Greasers, that's a separation between just the Greasers in general, which also kind of separates them from the Socias because, I mean, the oldest brother didn't go to school because they didn't have enough money, but the Socias are able to do that because they have the money to do that and the social status as well.
Yeah, that's some really good points. I think when regarding the Socias and the peer pressure that they put on to the Greasers with like tormenting them and harassing them every day. I mean, Ponyboy gets jumped all the time. Johnny gets jumped and he's afraid of everybody. I think that's it puts a lot of pressure on these young adolescent boys, and I think we see a lot of the bystander effect with this because nobody really wants to step in. All the adults in their lives are absent. They're not doing anything to help. Johnny's is abusive. It's a really toxic cycle, and it's definitely beat into them by this social divide that they're facing.
Yeah, definitely. It's also shown with the character Randy when, after Bob dies, it's shown with the Socias how much like they're also expected to reach a certain standard just because they are Soc, which kind of relates to how the Greasers are expected to reach a certain like low because they're Greasers, and that also helps with the divide, I would think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My next question is for Devin. Do you think The Outsiders is a tragedy or kind of a more uplifting story?
That's a really good question. I feel like in the beginning, it definitely does feel like a tragedy at first, like with all the conformity around being within specific social groups like the Socias and like the Greasers. But like I feel like there's like from like going through the story itself, like how Ponyboy kind of gets out of that kind of stereotype of kind of a greaser. But and like through the whole story kind of questions like the divide itself, and plus like through characters like Randy and like the violence going around these two rivalries. I just think that it's just a tragedy just turns into something more of a more positive kind of outcome because due to those like kind of realizations throughout the stories.
Yeah.
But like definitely it is definitely a tragedy. There's a lot of events within the story that could be considered within the conformities of a tragic.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the end and how she talked about how there are so many young boys all around the world facing this problem, I think I really couldn't, even though it was a good story and was heartfelt, I really couldn't get any other feeling but tragedy at the end of the story. Like, it gave me a lot of satisfaction reading it, but when I think about my own character Dallas and his death and just the tragedy in it and how horrible and violent it was compared to Johnny's, I can't really think of it in any other way but sadness.
Well, coming like with the author, she wanted to like kind of like highlight these kind of social groups and stuff. And I believe that through Dallas's death, she really highlights it because Dallas was like embraced the division between the socials and the greasers. He was a greaser. He was like the standout from like the rest of the group, in my opinion. And with his death, it kind of flipped the page or flipped like something in Ponyboy to like kind of like more involve himself with the stuff because of the actions that they did at the church or something like that. But I just think that like it was more of a reflective piece for Ponyboy.
Oh yeah, definitely.
In my opinion, from playing Ponyboy, I think it would be more of a coming of age story rather than a tragedy. Just because while Ponyboy did experience all these tragic things, like his friends dying, or his brothers kind of getting torn apart between him and just each other, and the breakup and all these things that happen that you would think, oh yeah, that is definitely a tragedy. At the very end of the story, it really, even though it's kind of hard for Ponyboy to get back, it kind of shows how
like he grows.
The death of Johnny and Dallas kind of help him grow, not necessarily to be like the best version of himself, but he definitely very much learns from those experiences, and it really shows like the struggles of going through like a life, not necessarily like everyone's life as a teenager, but like definitely life for some teenagers out there. And that's why I think it would be more of a coming of age story, because of the way that Ponyboy just travels through the whole story and just ends up much more aware of the world around him when it ends, rather than in the beginning when he was kind of closed off a little bit and only really thought that, this was supposed to be this way and this was supposed to be that way.
Yeah, I can totally see that. When regarding Dallas specifically, there was a good question about like what was the purpose of his death? Like why did Dallas die? Was it purposeful? What caused it? And did it end up having any worth? Like I know how you said how it's like a reflection for Ponyboy, but do you think that it could have been avoided? And was it the social pressures that caused it?
Well, I definitely think it was a social pressure because, like, since Dallas did embrace most of it, but I believe that at his core, he's just trying to fulfill that like stereotype, and like socials are bad, greasers have to be this profile. And I feel like with how he kind of set himself up, I believe his death wasn't kind of like totally he could totally evade his own death, but like I feel like that was at fault because of the social pressures, and like I think that his death is a like the big like picture kind of consequence, and see like where you would end up if you continue to go down this path. But like it just simply goes down to like he chose how to live, and he just suffered for it, or he faced his own consequences.
Yeah, I think it definitely showed the outcomes that could have happened based on the social pressures. But I think specifically, Dallas was so fed up with how the world was that the only thing he did care about, which was Johnny, and when he died and that was taken away from him, he felt like there was no other option but to kill himself. And that's really what S.E. Hinton put into the book, was Dallas wanted to be dead, and he always got what he wanted. That was the direct quote. And I think this is a direct cause of the conformity of being forced into these roles of greasers and violence and crime and breaking the law and being a hoodlum, Like, they're slammed with these horrible comments of being a grease or a hoodlum, or just that they can't really escape from. And I think it gives them purpose to embrace this figure of being a greaser. Like with Ponyboy, he looked up to his brothers because they were so strong and influential, and they had so much like great presence of being a greaser. But I think that when following that and following into that in obedience of those social norms, then you get the extremities of what Dallas had done to himself, which was kill himself.
Do you feel like that the division was caused by like inequality within the justice system? because on multiple occasions, I believe Dallas already since he's already been in jail and all that stuff, but like he already states like if the cops saw me doing this, I will get this much years on the spot. Like, do you think that that kind of fear of like that social in like that injustice in general is just like affected his own conformity through out the story?
I think in some part, I think it wasn't the outside enforcers of the justice system, but more of what it did to him when he was inside the prison. Because I remember he was talking to Johnny in the car, and he's like, "You don't know what prison will do to you. Even a couple months will turn you into this hard, closed off person." And he did not want that for Johnny. He wanted to preserve his innocence in that way. And so I think he did feel definitely betrayed and wrong and dirty because of his history in prison. I don't know if it was a direct outcome of the injustice because, I mean, he did break the law. He did cause all these crimes.
Yeah.
But, I mean, we see the fear of the authority figures and what will happen with Ponyboy because he's so afraid, oh, I'm going to get separated from my brothers. It's such a big pressure on him to stay good in school. Derry is constantly yelling at him to do good in grades so that they can stick together and he can get the life that Derry always wanted. So I think it's definitely a pressure for them.
So like Ponyboy is like the person who needs to break the cycle. That's what you're saying, right?
Oh yeah, I definitely agree with that.
Yeah.
I also think with Ponyboy, like based off of what I know at least, he's such a bystander. Like he is not as much in the action as like many of the other characters are. Like it seems like he's always getting talked to or something is always being explained to him. Like except for like his internal thoughts, most of the time he's pretty much just kind of on the sidelines, just like experiencing everything happening rather than like doing something about it because he's the youngest of the brothers and the youngest of the group of greasers. He really can't do anything either because he doesn't know what to do. And I think that is a big part, like going back to Dallas's death, that's a big part because I think that whether Dallas meant to or not, his death just really kind of showed, like both the deaths, Johnny and Dallas, just showed something to Ponyboy, like this stuff can kind of happen. And I don't think he really realized that until it happened to him, like up front.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's a really good point. I think my last question for the podcast is because there was something that changed in the book. There was a turning point with the Socs and the Greasers, but I want to know like what you guys think that turning point was, whether it was Randy not going to the Rumble or it was Dallas dying or it was Johnny breaking that cycle of abuse and having worth in his life by saving those children, even if it took his own life. Or was it Ponyboy or was it Cherry? Like, what do you guys think it was? What was that turning point?
I think it was Bob's death because as soon as that happened, it was kind of like a whoa moment for everyone. Like no one, when they're fighting and stuff, no one expected anyone to actually like kill anyone to the point of like death. Like they were just trying to, like the Socs were just messing around with the greasers and stuff. And so as soon as Bob died, it kind of shifted everyone. Like it made Dallas more of a father figure almost to Johnny. It made Johnny a little more open because he wasn't sure what was going to happen and didn't want, to just go to jail and not and be changed right away. And then Ponyboy just didn't know what to do because he's 14. He didn't think that anything like that could happen. And then with the Socs, Randy lost his best friend, and he really started to think about like why the Socs and the Greasers are so divided. And it changed Derry and Soda's perspective because that's when Johnny and Ponyboy ran away. And it's like they didn't know where he was. None of the guys did, except for Dallas. So I think Bob's death was the biggest turning point.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I think that was the moment when you stopped being a kid. That was the moment where all the innocence was lost, and suddenly,
yes, definitely,
all their world was crashing in on them, and they had to look at this from a new perspective of not, oh, we're gonna poke fun at this little kid because he's a greaser, or this Soc is stupid because they wear like nice pants and clothes and whatever. It was all real to them in that moment. And I think, yeah, that definitely brought the maturity that was needed.
Yeah, I do agree with that. I do agree that Bob's death, or was it Bob's death? Yeah, Bob's death. Did was a turning point within the tone of the novel or play itself. But like, and like it kind of like travels into all like the other stuff, like how when Randy talks to Pony Boy, kind of opens up like how violence doesn't, like how he thinks of what he thinks of violence, that nothing will change with violence. And even like with that speech, like, or with that little talk with Pony Boy, the Rumble was like, yeah, it's the Greasers did win the Rumble, but like, what did it do? It didn't really do anything. And like the social standings are still the same, everything's just still the same. So like, I feel like with the reality of things, that someone did die and like there's consequences while things are going on at the same time, I just feel like it just really separates from like the social standings and then like what collectively everyone else feels about one situation, like kind of a reality of it.
Yeah, I
Just like
agree.
shifts everyone's mindset a little bit.
I wouldn't have even have thought of that unless you guys brought that up. I was gonna say something about Randy, but I think because that changed Ponyboy's perspective on the Socs. But he's like, he's not a Soc, he's just a guy, and that was one of my
Yeah.
favorite quotes to 2-Bit. But yeah, I think overall the story really touches on the dangers of the conformity of these social groups and how dangerous it is to follow this group think of following in with these dangerous situations. And yeah, I think that was a great discussion just there.
It's also in the play version. It's as soon as he dies is right when like intermission happens, which usually in a play that's right when the turning point kind of clicks for everything, like right when right when the climax starts. So that's what made me think of Bob's death, is because, well, then you left the audience sitting with what's going to happen next. Like, how is this going to affect all the different characters? Because someone actually just died.
Yeah, that's good. That's good stuff. Good stuff, guys. Okay.
Cool, great.
Thanks for being in my podcast. Joe better love that.